Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to vlog 210, Solitude and Connectivity, Writing Through Change. Mostly these vlogs are ahistorical, and intentionally so. They exist so that at different points of your life and your career you can pluck them and maybe they are useful to you at this particular point. So they're about you in the world rather than the world in you. But today's a little bit different. The world is gripped right now, and I'm recording this in 2020, by the coronavirus, and people are sick. People are dying and people are frightened. And those people include, yes, you've guessed it, PhD students. And we've all discovered the phrase in the last couple of weeks, social distancing. Social distancing. Who knew this was a thing? Well, yes, this is a thing. But we are in our writing series. And I wanted to, in many ways, use this context, use this environment to reflect and ponder on the nature of writing. So think about your writing landscape now and in the future. Now, many of us as scholars, we're pretty isolated normally. That's what we are, we're pretty isolated. We've got a lot going on in our minds. And when something like this hits you, you feel it very, very deeply. And you do feel like you are alone in the world. And I really get that. And that's not just simply created, by the way, through a global virus. This sort of sense of being alone in the world has lots of causes in life. You might lose, a friend of yours might die, a partner or a family member may die. You may lose your job, you may lose your house. Something terrible happens to you in terms of health and sickness. And all of those terrible events in our lives give us that sense that we are alone in a complicated world, that we're uncertain in our footing, we're uncertain who we are and where we're going. Is that how you're feeling? I get that. Now, writing, let alone research more generally, requires us to be centered, self-confident and organized. It also requires that we are somewhat comfortable with who we are and what we can achieve. And when the world, our world, the world, is in chaos, you just can't feel settled in your own skin. Now, I absolutely understand this. I absolutely understand this. In my career, I've worked in incredibly volatile environments, truly dreadful jobs, right? I've moved countries. I've spent years of my life in temporary and transitory accommodation, literally living in one room. I've had to care for a dying husband. I've had to work out how much of my life was left after he did die. What of me is left there? Is there enough of me to keep going? That's a decision to make. Then, of course, I had the very odd experience of falling in love and getting married again at an impossibly old age and working out what that means now. And through all of these extraordinary life changes, and I'm not unusual, I'm a very ordinary person, but through all those life changes, I've kept writing. And so when I was preparing this vlog for you today on solitude and connectivity, I kept returning to one memory in my life, and I hope this might be useful for you. So one memory in my life, I remember being in one of those seriously volatile jobs. So I'd accepted a job, it was a senior job, accepted the job, and I knew within 1 week of arriving that I'd made the greatest mistake in my life. Okay, so in this particular job, 8 full professors left that university in an 8-month period, and one of my colleagues killed himself. Okay, right. Now, I realised, thankfully, and so did my beloved late husband, Steve Redhead, we realised pretty early on that this was a volatile environment and we'd made a mistake. And so we didn't want to compound the mistake by buying a house there, so we didn't. But that meant that we were living in a one-bedroom shared accommodation. We were living in a bed and breakfast for those 8 months. So no cooking facilities and a shared bathroom. So I was in a foreign country, in a truly, truly dreadful job, living in a room with no functional toilet that I could use at any point, and trying to write. And from that truly dreadful location came one book, Digital Dieting. And I'm incredibly proud of this book. I actually think it's my best book. It's not the most highly cited, still it's been cited very well, for which I'm grateful. But for me, it is the best book. And the reason why I think it is the best book is I, particularly early in my career, was this about book 12 or 13? I think it was. But for the first 10 or so books of my career, I was known for being angry. So I was an angry woman, and I would just, like, let me just share with you my anger in a book. So, bleh. That book's different. It's melancholic. It is carrying a sadness. It's carrying the weight of the world. So as you can see, context marinates a prose. That was written on a 2 foot by 2 foot wonky desk with a really, really dodgy chair, right? Everything was wrong when that book was being written. And look, right now on this planet, it feels the same. Just sort of everything's going wrong. So if you're enrolled in a PhD now, we can't pretend that extraordinary sights and events are occurring. They certainly are. We can't pretend that we're living in a really odd historical time. We are. And we can't pretend that this context is not going to transform your PhD. So for our students in the empirical and sciences, so social sciences and sciences more generally, there's never been a more important time for you to validate your methods and your methodology. This is the time to really dig deeply into your methodology and focus in a strong, clear and precise way on dissemination of your research. So science communication, your time is now. So you know, I hope you do, whatever area of the sciences or the social sciences in which you are working, whether it's medicine, health sciences, nursing, whether it's chem, physics, bio, maths, computer science, through to public policy, business, finance, your research must be accurate. Your research must be rigorous. And you must now focus on strong writing, powerful communication, diverse dissemination. It is important that citizens can find, read, interpret and use your research. And similarly for my wonderful colleagues and students in the humanities, your research has never been more important. We are losing the very skin of our civilization at the moment. And we need you. Whatever your paradigm, your trope, your discipline, we need you to remind us what being human is now. So hashtag no pressure. But that's the world twirling around us. What about you? What about you? How is this isolation, this craziness, this volatility impacting on you, your writing and your PhD? How can you write when the world is falling apart? When your methodologies that you thought would occur when you were going through this rigorous research design, that those methodologies have now failed. That your time in the lab is now shortened and all the collaborations that you thought would occur, they're not going to. And you are feeling alone, seriously isolated, and yeah, a bit weird. What's going to happen? So that's what the vlog is on today. Solitude and community. Writing through change. So this presentation is softer than I would usually deliver because we're living in incredibly hard times. And so this vlog today is gently moving you through 3 stages: solitude, intentionality, and community. 3 stages. Each of these words I've tethered to an incredibly fabulous and important and weird book to help us move to the next stage. So together, let's look at productive solitude, intentionality, and community to create new models for PhD research and new strategies for scholarship. Solitude is an incredibly potent word. I'm not talking about isolation or atomization or closure or disconnection. To be a researcher requires solitude. And I know we academics, we live in our heads a lot. And to be honest with you, I have a whole life going on up there that I don't share with anybody in particular. And look, that life up there, bit focused on shoes, some high quality acid house dance music clearly. I focus a lot on sort of unusual, sparkly, weird jewellery. And obviously in my head there's a lot of information about the zombie apocalypse. Who knew that would be an important data set at this juncture? But we all have these rich lives going on in our heads. And of course those lives are very rarely shared with other people. So solitude is powerful, and it's very different from isolation. And solitude makes us as scholars. I often refer to this as thinking time. You need thinking time, I need thinking time, scholars need thinking time. But the other word for solitude is isolation, and it is important that we don't think about isolation, we focus on solitude. And to look at the value of solitude that makes it different from isolation, I want to focus on a great book written in 1867 by William Alger, A-L-G-E-R. Might be Alger, but I'm saying Alger. William Alger, and this book is called The Genius of Solitude. The Genius of Solitude. He argues that the brightest people, and he calls them geniuses, but that was his time, but he argues that the brightest of people require solitude. Solitude allows the brightest of people to manage uncertainty, manage self-doubt, and manage hopelessness. So in the space between certainty and the unknown sits solitude. So as our life choices increase, we have a lot of freedom of choice. But the problem is that freedom of choice can paralyze us, right? Because we've got choice, but how are we going to use it? What direction are we going to mobilize? How are we going to move forward? And indeed, with all these choices, what is forward? So the freedom to choose can be paralyzing, and the advantage of solitude is it brings us back to ourselves. It gives us focus. It also gives us time and an awareness of time as well. An awareness of time to complete our research and focus on our writing. And the reason that we finish a section or a chapter or an article or indeed a thesis is that so that our solitude can end, so our research can be shared. So remember, the point of a PhD, the point of research, is to share it, is to disseminate it. So community, connection, communication is the next stage after solitude. So Alger argued that intelligent people see the world differently. They have trouble communicating. They have trouble sharing ideas. They have trouble being understood. And this might be meaningful to you. Think about how many of you, thousands of you around the world, have contacted me and said stuff like, I can't talk about my thesis with anybody. My partner, my husband, my wife doesn't understand me. My kids have no idea what I'm doing. My friends just don't get it. Familiar? Yeah. So the consequences of this disconnection from the people around us is solitude, yes, but also loneliness, and also depression. This isolation, therefore, is not necessarily a choice, because very few people in the world will ever understand your research or understand your passion or your focus. And that's real, that's true, because so very few people in the world could ever even think of doing a PhD. But the problem emerges, I think, when the loneliness, when the depression leads to indecision. And I think that's what's happening now, right? So you don't have a structure or a shape to your life. So you're not reveling in solitude. You're just lonely. So at that point, you need to make decisions. You need to make choices. And you need to approach solitude with consciousness and with reflection. Conscious solitude requires time and determination, but it also allows us to develop skills, proficiencies, and then it can push us to the next stage of our lives. So the key is to, if you can, avoid that feeling of isolation while in solitude. Because isolation is when you end up with the negativity, the ego stuff, anxiety, jealousy, rage, anger. So what we have to do is create a new dance between solitude and society. So we use solitude and all the gifts that it grants us to move towards society, to share our knowledge and disseminate our research, because then we can serve others. So as you can see, this solitude matters a great deal. And Alger argued that, quote, originality is understood slowly and with difficulty, end of quote. So, of course, a PhD, what it's doing is it's creating an original contribution to knowledge. That's what a PhD is doing. So you are doing something new. That's the point of doing a PhD. So therefore, you need to understand that when you're doing an original contribution to knowledge, people won't understand you. That's why it is original. So original research without dissemination is a waste. It's also limiting how remarkable you are and how remarkable you can be. But this process, all of this, actually starts with solitude. And Alger stated, and I love this, quote, fools chatter, the gods are silent, end of quote. And if you can take anything from this book published in 1867, then it is this, and this changed my life, can I say, quote, solitude is what we make it. Then we are what it makes us. End of quote. Look, I will read that again. Solitude is what we make it. Then we are what it makes us. Wow. So this stillness, this quietness can create us as a scholar and can make us a stronger citizen in difficult times. Solitude matters, but your research, while founded in solitude, must not stop there. So in our dance between solitude and society, we have to organise that space. So this space requires information literacy, good reading, measurable outcomes, and a sense of what a professional achievement in this area looks like, and envisioning that success. So even in an environment of social distancing, or if tragedies in life knock you flat, knock you out, how do you organise those steps from solitude to society. That's the key. And that's, of course, the next step of our vlog, intentionality. Intentionality. And for this session, I'm using a fantastically strong book that I like a lot, also radically disagree with. I always love books like that. It's like, I think that's great, or wow, that's dodgy. That's great research. And it's from Cal Newport, wonderful scholar, Cal Newport, Digital Minimalism. Digital Minimalism. Now, Newport is a tenured professor in computer science at Georgetown, and I'm a big fan of his, actually. So he's got this wonderful career in computer science, which is terrific, but he's also a great scholar of work and the changes in work. So he's a great model, I think, for all of us. So this is my area of expertise, but I have this secondary area that I'm terribly interested in as well. And of course, Newport's ended up all the citations happening in this secondary area too, which is fantastic. So Newport's digital minimalism is very useful for us in thinking through intentionality, right? He argues, as we've argued in a lot of these vlogs, that we need to demonstrate consciousness in the selection of our platforms, our interfaces, our hardware and our software. And we have to use those decisions and choices of our interfaces to calibrate our personal and professional lives. So what Newport values is intense focus. Yet he argues that so much of our world is a bombardment of nonsense, of gossip, not really information, just really basic stuff that doesn't matter. And he argues that this stuff everywhere, this information everywhere, creates the exhaustion that we experience in modern life, and indeed all the problematic behaviours that we're seeing. He argues that we require structures, intentional structures in how we manage this is our personal life and this is our professional life. Really good argument. So he suggests basically the mobile phone be kept away for a lot of your working life and also in your personal life, and organised for particular hours of the day. And he argues strongly, as I do, keep email for working hours and create what he describes as, quote, a fully fledged philosophy of technology use, end of quote. He argues that we need to start with our values, to have answers to the question, what is important to us? And from that, make decisions about people, make decisions about technology, make decisions about time. So this is digital minimalism. But also it's great because it's encouraging intentionality in our personal and professional lives. So I'll give you a great example of this. Right? You say to me, or you state to anybody, the PhD is important in my life. Oh, the PhD is important to my life. Great. Then look at how you're spending time in your life. That's what you've said is important. Is your behaviour demonstrating that that's true? Intentionality. This is important, so make your behaviour mesh with that importance. So intentionality is crucial for making solitude meaningful, and also knowing when to break that solitude and link with others. So we need to really start managing the extremes. We're not talking about being a neo-Luddite. We're not talking about the quantified selfers. They're the crazy other ends. That's great. Knock yourself out. We're all basically in the middle. Let's negotiate the middle with consciousness. And we always need to remember, technology is not the problem here. Technology is great. The problem is the user. The problem is the people who are using it, right? So Facebook, mobile phones, incredibly useful. They can also be incredibly destructive. All these decisions really start with one point. What does time mean to you? Is time there to be wasted, or is time there to be used? So optimize your life goals. Be intentional in your engagement with people, online organisations, conversations, tweets. and be conscious of what you are sending out into the world. Now, when you have that consciousness, you are making your solitude meaningful. And there is incredible value in sitting alone with your thoughts. Think about Newton, Spinoza, Nietzsche, Wittgenstein, scholars who revelled in their solitude. Now, as you can see though, not a lot of women on that list. And that's why, of course, Virginia Woolf in 1929 wrote A Room of One's Own. Solitude is a gift we give ourselves, but it is an empowered gift. The powerful can choose to be alone. But also, the powerful then have to use intentionality and decide when to share. Now, mental health professionals have argued that this continual connectivity that we have at the moment has meant that the generations born after 1995, so where this connectivity is part of their primary socialisation, so the generations born after 1995 have the highest incidence of anxiety, because that white noise of mobile digitisation is now presenting a cost. Therefore, we have to manage these cycles of solitude and connectivity, and that takes power. It also takes discipline. So as we move to our final stop of the day, connection, connectivity, remember the values of taking those long walks and sitting in stillness. Because when we value silence, when we value stillness, we can then reclaim conversation and connectivity and make it meaningful. So the argument that we're making today, all of the stuff we're talking about today, is starting to filter or funnel into the phrase attention economics. So if you start to hear about attention economics, this is big, it's going to be big, it's this sort of field. So therefore, let's move to our final hurrah of this day in this very quiet early morning. Let's look at connectivity. So how do we make our solitude productive? And the answer is through writing. We explore with intention how our ideas move into the world. And to explore this movement, I'm looking at Radha Agrawal. Her remarkable book, Belong. What a great title, Belong. Find your people, create community, and live a more connected life. So her maxim is an incredibly important one. You have to go in to go out. You have to go in to go out. She argues that we need to focus on authentic belonging structures. And I'm sort of quite amazed with myself. I've spent the last 20 years of my life sort of playing with the word authenticity and, inauthentic authenticity. And a lot of my writing is played with, there's no such thing as authentic. And it's funny, at my age now, I'm reclaiming the word authentic and trying in my life to make it meaningful. So we're arguing in this book that the focus is on authentic belonging structures with clear answers to the questions, who am I and what is my purpose? Who am I and what is my purpose? So when these two questions are answered, we connect with others, and that connection creates community and nurturing. So even though it's a weak word, one of my weird words, this authenticity matters. A recent survey, and this just broke my heart when I read this, a recent survey confirmed that 1 in 4 Americans reported that they have no friends to confide in. No friends. No friends, 1 in 4, 25%, to discuss important matters with in their life. And that number has tripled in the last 30 years. So these weak social ties are harmful to our health. And what we have to do is create, and I love this phrase, quote, energetic connection points. energetic connection points. So we're cool, we're in solitude, and then we have energetic connection points. Love that. Now these can be analog, physical, corporeal, or digital, but they do require that we show up and we commit. We're not sort of like, oh, I'm sort of a bit interested. When you do front up for that energetic connection point, you are there and you're engaged, right? Boom, yeah. So there are a series of questions we need to ask to scaffold our understanding of these commitments, and I found these very helpful. Who do you look up to? Who do you depend on? I love this one. Who has kept you safe through your life? Who didn't keep you safe through your life? What worries you? What do you take for granted? And I love this one. How do your excuses serve you? So importantly, I think, for our current challenges and the challenges that follow us, we need to ask, what are you doing today? What are you doing right now? And commit to this present. Not worrying about the past and what you should have done, oh, if only I'd known. Let the past go, or what does the future hold? Let all of that go. All of these debates, by the way, are referred to as the attention economy. Attention economy. So we use our solitude to summon our intentions. And then we activate these intentions by building communication, connection, and community. So why this discussion matters so much to PhD students, particularly now, is that it really strikes at the very core of who we are as researchers. And I recently attended a seminar with some very, very senior international scholars, needless to say, on Zoom. And I asked them in that room, so tell me, what's your project? What's the goal? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? What's the goal, team? What are we doing? And fascinating, this room of remarkably brilliant people sort of looked at me oddly and said, oh, we don't really have a project. No, we all do our own thing. No, we don't have anything really. We just do our own stuff. We commit to our own stuff. And there was sort of this silence after they all stated that, and they realised the tragedy of that, and that it just wasn't really convincing, and it was a bit weak and actually a bit embarrassing. So we all have to ask ourselves, why are we getting out of bed? What's the point? What is the point? Crucial question. And my great boss, the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research, Robert Saint. Hello, Rob. What a privilege every day to work for this man. Rob Saint, legend. And Rob asked in an interview, we do a lot of interview panels together and gigs together, and Rob asked in an interview a truly remarkable question. In an interview, what problem are you trying to solve? What problem are you trying to solve? What a great question. Not just for an interview. That my life changed. Oh, I don't know what happened to the person that was interviewed, but what problem are you trying to solve? So every morning I get up and write, Tara, what problem am I trying to solve? That's great. So you have choices to make. You can be disoriented and disorganised. You can be upset. You can be anxious. You can be a bit hurt. Or you can make different choices. Read, think, write, make life meaningful. So start to create that community architecture that builds your spaces for belonging, so you can communicate with courage. This is the future of belonging. A dance between solitude and society. Me and we. I wish you love, light, and peace. Tea out.